Hi everybody and welcome to a tutorial on phase modulation. Today we're going to look at how you can use the Phase 4 synth within Bitwig Studio to get cool sounds with the phase modulation. We get more of a woody sound. A woody woodpecker sound. Phase modulation at the core is that you have a waveform and then you apply modulation to this waveform with other waveforms to get interesting timbres and sounds. So I prepared this little chart to show you how phase modulation works in a nutshell. So first out we have the carrier waveform, which is modulated by another waveform. And it is a rough example. The modulator signal is a faster frequency than the carrier signal. And as you can see, the output waveform is this really beautiful, interesting waveform. I recorded this phase modulation tutorial as a live stream and I've split it into 2 parts, so make sure you check out part 2 after watching this one. If you want to learn more about music production and sound design, make sure you check out my courses at edu.morningdewmedia.com. Okay, let's go. Why I came up with this idea to do a Phase 4, a little Phase 4 video is because I had this little melody going. I found one of these, found some random preset here in the Omnisphere package called Dolby's Guitarette. Yeah, so this Dolby's Guitarette from Omnisphere. I will play you this preset. So you can hear there's like this, the bell tone, and then you also have this crisp transient high end. And transients are extremely important in sounds. Just to take the difference between a guitar and a piano, for example. If you get rid of the transient from both those samples, the guitar and the piano, they will almost sound like the same sample. And the same with the kalimbas, etc. If you take away that important transient, the sound starts to sound more like the same type of sound. But yeah, I felt that this sound was a little bit dull. I wanted it to be more crisp and have a more high end. And that's when you can go for FM synthesis or phase modulation synthesis, which you can do in Phase 4. It's a little bit hard to get a grasp around, especially if you're new to FM synthesis. But with today's video, I hope you to clarify a little bit around phase modulation synthesis. So that's the original sound. And then we have my Phase 4 replication of the sound, so to speak. But with some adjustments that I felt necessary to make it pop a little bit more. So that's my version and the Omnisphere variation. So you can hear it's much more like over a dull clock or a bell sound. So I wanted more like crisp high end, just a little bit more, not too much, because we don't want this sound to take over the mix, because it's still gonna be a little bit of a background sound behind the vocals. Right, so let's dig into the Phase 4 synth, shall we? So we're gonna create a new instrument track and toss up Phase 4. The red, the blue, the yellow and the purple here, these are your sound generators in the Phase 4 synth. Like with all FM synthesis or phase modulation synths, we can mix and match these and apply one oscillator waveform onto another. And that's how we get the phase modulation. But I like to set the first one here, the red one, also to be a sine wave. That's where we change the waveform type. And you should also expand this device view so you can see all the different waveforms in the Phase 4 synth when we press a key. So if we play a C3, we get to see the oscillation of the waveforms. These are basically the sound waves. And we can see that the blue one is going a little bit slower. That means that it's lower in pitch. And you can firstly control the different ratios on each of these oscillators to control basically the pitch of the oscillator. And currently we're only listening to the red one because we have the volume. This is the volume knob for the oscillators. We have the red one set here to 0 dB. That means that we have full volume from the red sound generator. And all the other generators have their volume to infinitely low. So we're only listening to the red one. And if we want to listen to the blue one, we can increase the volume here. And as you can hear, we get a lower note from the blue oscillator. And how about the yellow one? Yeah, as you can see, it's more narrow waves. That means that it's a higher frequency. So let's listen to the yellow oscillator. Indeed, it's a higher frequency. And then the purple one is an even higher frequency. And you can see that also here on the ratio setting. It's 4:1, the yellow one is 2:1, and the blue one is 1:2. The first is 1:1. That means that it will follow the exact key that we press on the keyboard, because we also have this key tracking activated for all the different oscillators. So let's listen to the purple one. So that's a really high frequency. So already there, that's one way of creating a pad. But this is not phase modulation or phase synthesis, because we're just activating the volumes of the different oscillators. How we do phase modulation in phase 4 is that we need to reduce first for this type of sound that we're going to create now. We're going to reduce the volumes of all the oscillators except our carrier. And this is called the carrier because this is the audible oscillator or audible sound generator, the red one. And as I said, we can control the ratio and increase or decrease the pitch by octaves. And some other and we can also change the pitch of the oscillator by changing this pitch offset, because sometimes you want to use other values than just the pure ratios of the oscillator. But let's keep our original carrier source sound generator to be the exact pitch that we play on the keyboard. So we set the pitch offset at 0 and the ratio to 1:1. Now, if we want to phase modulate this oscillator and apply another sound generator upon this, the carrier, we will send a modulator to modulate our carrier. And we can do that by using these modulation amount buttons, knobs. And now you can hear we're starting to get some weird sounds happening. It's almost a dubstep bass, but it's a little bit too mellow and not as like upfront as you probably want from a dubstep bass. This is more like a pad kind of soft sound that we get. So as always with the things in Bitwig, we can modulate that, and we can either use like the filter envelope or the amplitude envelope, but of course we want to use one of the modulator slots instead. So we press the plus sign there and maybe add just a classic LFO. And we're going to attach that to the modulation amount, the blue amount. And we also need to deactivate the bipolarity, because you can see that it's only half of the waveform cycle. We can get rid of the bipolarity and only go from 0% and upwards. And if you add some values like this, some modulation values like this, and you suddenly don't want to have it as profound, you can always use the amount here to control the amount of modulation that the LFO applies to your target. So there we have a quick, soft FM pad, a dreamy little pad. Now we could just add some effects and go home. But we won't, of course, we won't stop there. We need to make it more interesting. And one thing you can do is use this frequency offset. It's currently set to 0 Hertz. So it's going to be the same hertz, and you can see we only have that modulation from the LFO applied to the modulation amount for the blue oscillator modulating our red carrier. But we can introduce a little bit of frequency offset here, and if you're listening to headphones, you're probably going to hear we're starting to get some stereo effect. So there, quite a nice little pad sound. Maybe just increase the attack and the release. And of course, we need to go ahead here and make it a full patch. Let's just add some delay. And we're going to make it a ping pong. Maybe increase the high frequency a little bit on the equalizer for the delay, and a little bit more feedback, of course. Let's just check the volume here. Yeah, so we can control the movement in the stereo field with this hertz value. And as you can see, if we keep it pretty low, we get just this slow, soft movement in the stereo field. But as we increase that frequency offset, you're gonna hear more panning, so to speak, with the oscillation. Until it gets into audio rate modulation. We start to get this like a metallic sound. But we want to keep it fairly low to just get a little bit of stereo effect on the pad. Right, so how about if we want to make the sound more upfront, because it's very soft pad sound. Let's decrease the attack. What we can do is either change the ratio here on the second oscillator, our modulator, which is modulating the frequency, the phase of the red oscillator. If we change the ratio, listen here. cute little dreamy sound. Can be fun. And the higher we increase the ratio, the more we're gonna get into the metallic territory of sounds. Until we get very nasty sounds. And as I mentioned before, it's always good to have this this expanded view open so we can see how we affect the original waveform. So if we want to create a bell type of sound, it could be good to use a ratio of around 6:1. But we're gonna remove the LFO controlling that modulation. We're gonna change it to an ADSR, or maybe use one of the more recent segments devices. So we're just gonna delete that one and add, maybe let's use the segments. And we're gonna expand the view for the segments and make it non-loopable, because we have a few different ways that this envelope will behave. The segments is basically an envelope, like your amplitude envelope, but you have more control since you have the nodes, so you can control how the envelope behaves. And we're going to create a snappy attack, so a very fast transient, and then we're going to go pretty quickly here down into a lower data value. So let's try to apply that to our modulation here. So click the Learn button here, or the mapping, and apply that to the BR modulation amount. And suddenly we have more of a bell sound rather than the pad sound. And if we decrease the ratio of that blue oscillator modulating our red oscillator, we get more of like a woody sound, a woody woodpecker sound. Also a quite sweet little sound. And how we create this envelope will heavily affect what kind of sound we get from the phase modulation. Right, so how about if we want to get like more of a snappy attack on this sound, like that crispy sound that you get from like a kalimba or something, because this sounds like a more of a like a cotton soft sound. Right, so we want to create more of like a crisp high end to this sound. And we have two oscillators, two sound generators here that we haven't used in the sound yet. So we have plenty of possibilities here to add another sound generator and mold that into like a noise kind of sound. So yeah, so we can bump the volume here for the yellow sound generator. But we're going to change that to more of a noisy sound. So what we can do is modulate this oscillator with itself, which will create a really nasty things. So let's listen here. We can actually get rid of a little bit of the red oscillator in volume. So we only listen to the yellow oscillator. So let's increase the yellow modulation to the yellow oscillator. Hear that? So, a totally different type of sound. And then if we increase the modulation depth here, we're also, or the modulation amount, we're also going to get like almost pure noise in the end. So we could use this as the snappy part or that crisp part of our sound. But we don't want it to be like this sustained sound. We just want that little snap, that very short transient from this noise. And how do we do that? Well, we can add another ADSR or segments modulator to modulate the volume of the yellow oscillator extremely quickly. So let's try the segments again here because the fun of it. I think there's also an ADSR type of curve already that we could use as our starting point, which is good. So how do you guys like the new segments and curves and all these new MSEG type of modulators in Bitwig? Do you find them useful? And now we can apply that to the volume of the yellow oscillator. But we want it to be snappy, so make it a really, really fast attack. And go down pretty quickly like this. And we're going to get rid of the looping, because we don't want a looping envelope. So there we have a snap. And if we apply our original sound from the red oscillator, we have more of like a kalimba sound. And if you feel that it's too high volume in that snap, we can always just lower the modulation amount. And there's actually a trick to faster find or a trick. You could always click the device like this, and here we can see in the inspector panel, we can see all the modulations that's going on here, and we can see that segments 2 is modulating the Y mix, the yellow oscillator mix value. So we could just reduce the volume here if we want less of that snap. So that's how we create this snap. And if you want to have a more metallic flavor, you can of course fiddle with the ratio settings or the hertz value for the frequency. Okay, so again, let's make this more of a bell sound, because now it's like a woody kalimba sound. Sounds like some kind of Enya patch. So what we can do now is change the ratio of the blue oscillator to get back into our like metallic kind of territory. And we can also use the pitch offset. So let's set this to 6 semitones. Let's listen to the original Omnisphere sound. So it's pretty close, and we created that with just one instance of the Phase 4 synth. It's another type of delay, of course, on that one, but it's pretty close. So that's how you go about if you want to create this type of bell sounds. And we can make it more metallic. And now we also get the sound more upfront and more in your face. So depending on where we want to place this type of sound in our mix, we can make it either more metallic or more dull, if you just lower the ratio here. So it's a really simple patch. Actually really simple to set up here in the Phase 4 synth, and extremely easy to control if you want to make it more dull or more like high-end. So you don't have to dig into any equalizers or stuff to increase or decrease or mix this for the track. We can just mix and match everything in the Phase 4 synth. Let's try fiddling with the segments a little bit. Yeah, so this is still set to looping, and it's actually quite an interesting sound. We get a little bit of texture happening, so if we would go ahead and add some reverb after the delay, maybe some Valhalla Room, the usual suspects. What do you think about that sound? Personally, I think that's a beautiful, lush bell sound that we could definitely use in some tracks. And if you don't want to replicate this, I can probably toss this up as a downloadable preset on the Discord channel. Just let me know here in the chat if you want this if you want this preset.